Revolutionary greetings, comrades. It is Red Sunday, 8th of October 2023. In the previous video, we did give you a summary of the political lecture by Professor Ibbo Mandaza. He presented that at the O.R. Tambo Political School. The Zimbabwe question is complex. It needs a deep analysis for us to come up with a solution or what to be done to resolve the crisis that we find ourselves in as Zimbabweans and of course with our partners. Professor Ibbo Mandaza proposes the creation of a transitional authority, which he believes that it will then result in the holding of a free and a fair election that will be acceptable to everyone. The challenge with this arrangement is that it reduces the Zimbabwean crisis to a crisis of the failure to hold a democratic election. It does not speak to the nature of the crisis in scientific terms. So to Professor Ibbo Mandaza and others and his team is that he put in place a transitional authority which brings together political parties, civil society organizations, trade unions, and everyone else. After the lifespan of a transitional authority, you will then be able to hold a free and fair election in Zimbabwe. That's how he then reduces the world crisis into, in terms of its solution. The nature of the Zimbabwean crisis, first and foremost, is that we are engaged in a struggle against imperialism. This cannot be ignored. Secondly, we are engaged in a struggle against the looting class in Zimbabwe. So we cannot then reduce this to an electoral question. And we have said Zimbabwe today is a deep state which is militaristic and correct. So this cannot be reduced in holding free and fair elections or in attempting to hold free and fair election to an extent that you then propose a transitional authority. The problem with the transitional authority, you are assuming that you are moving from dictatorship to a democratic order. So you transit from dictatorship to a democratic order through the transitional authority, which Professor Ibbo Mandaza proposes. What Ibbo Mandaza and his team are missing is that we must transit from this economic setup that we're in to an economy where the majority of the people of Zimbabwe will benefit. In other words, we must transit from the capitalist mode of production to a socialist economy. That is the transition that is required in Zimbabwe. And how do you transit? Part of the transition or the transitional phase requires us building a national democratic economy. Building a national democratic economy means that in this transitional phase, in the national democratic economy, in the building of the national democratic economy, one, we raise the class consciousness of the working class and peasantry, because we argue that you cannot transit from the capitalist mode of production in Zimbabwe or in any country for that matter direct to socialism. It will not work. You need a citizenry that is class conscious. So you need to raise the class consciousness of the working class and the peasantry. In other words, you need to build a class conscious citizenry for you to transit to the next stage of human development. Secondly, you need to win over in this transitional phase. You need to win over the military. We are in a deep state which is militaristic in character. In other words, we need to understand the fears of the military. Why are we in a deep state? which is militaristic in character. How then do we dismantle this deep state? Once we dismantle this deep state, who benefits? Who get to benefit from the dismantling of this deep state, which the proposal by Professor Ibbo Mandaza does not speak to? It is common cause that today the military is deeply involved in the economy. But the economy is not ticking in Zimbabwe. If we study closely the 2023 results, is that there's a gap in the military itself. There's a gap between ordinary soldiers. I'm sure you saw a video where I think it's an American guy who went outside the State House, was filming the presidential guard soldiers, ended up going to buy them what is called Russian beer, right? So there is a gap between ordinary soldiers and the generals. The deep state does not involve ordinary soldiers because they are just paid like any other civil servant. Ordinary soldiers, ordinary Central Intelligence Organization officials or officers known as the CIO, the police, and everyone in the military, in the security sector, they are all suffering. It is only the military elite that is looting the resources, working in cohorts with the political leadership. So we cannot ignore that small elite that is looting the resources. It is this military elite that controls the Zimbabwean state. So for us to dismantle it, we must enter into some form of dialogue with the military generals to agree in the building of the national democratic economy. Because the national democratic economy, as we argue in our documents, it is not socialist in character. Because we recognize that you need to work with capital. We need to work with the traditional leaders in rural communities in Zimbabwe for us to build a national democratic economy. We need to raise the class consciousness of the workers. We need to build a class conscious citizenry so that we can then transit to a socialist mode of production. So Ibbo Mandaza reduces everything to a bourgeoisie election to say, how do you allow the other component of the bourgeoisie that is not in charge of government today to also join into government? That is his proposal. So we dismiss his proposal that because it is not representative of the working class and the peasantry. It seeks to entrench, or it seeks to bring on board the bourgeoisie that is in civil society and elsewhere into government. What Zimbabwe needs is for us to build a national democratic economy as a transitional phase to a socialist mode of production. We should not reduce everything to an electoral contest. So as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, we are saying we need a national dialogue. We have already provided the framework which we are developing on how to build a national democratic economy. We need to have this conversation. We need to have this dialogue. Because at the heart of this problem is that young people are living in thousands into neighboring countries. And we have spoken previously about what it does when they arrive in countries like South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, elsewhere, where then they compete for little resources in poor communities in the countries where they arrive. So, in resolving the Zimbabwean crisis, we do not need a transitional authority as proposed by Professor Ibbo Mandaza. We need to build a national democratic economy. This is the transitional phase from the capitalist mode of production to the socialist mode of production. Foreign direct investment will not work in Zimbabwe. An economy that is influenced by imperialist forces will not work in Zimbabwe. It has not worked before. So all of us must then begin to say, for us to resolve the crisis in Zimbabwe, we need to build a national democratic economy. This is the transitional phase from a capitalist mode of production to a socialist mode of production. As we argued at the first Congress of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, that socialism is not like your TV remote where you simply change from a capitalist mode of production to a socialist mode of production. You need to go through a transitional phase. And the transitional phase is that we must build an economy that it benefits every Zimbabwean. We must, at the workplace, raise the class consciousness of the workers. This will require us in setting up political schools or political study groups at the workplace, recruit workers into trade unions, intensify political education inside the rural-based organizations so that we achieve the goal of raising the class consciousness of the class that we represent, that is the working class and the peasant. Please share your views. I am Ngqabuto Nicholas Mabena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. If you're on TikTok, please follow us. Otherwise, have a great day. Amandla, comrades.